Understanding any subject starts understanding by its definition. Now, technically, first we'll discuss about the definition of a tax. What do you mean by tax? What is a tax technically? What is a tax? Oh, that's not a tax. That's a category of tax. What's a tax? Remember, tax is a compulsory levy. Tax is a compulsory levy that if it is levied upon you, you can't escape it, you have to pay it to the government. And here, you means it may be an individual or it may be a company. Okay? Tax is a compulsory levy that need to be paid by the people and by the companies to the government without any fail. Without any fail means you can't escape it. If it is levied upon you, you have to pay it. That's the basic definition of a tax. What's a tax? Tax is a compulsory levy. It's a compulsory. You can't escape it. Tax is a compulsory levy that need to be paid to the government by the people and by the companies without any fail if it is levied upon them. That's the meaning of a tax. Now, when we talk about the tax, I hope you understood the meaning of tax. Now, here 2 points what you need to remember is it need to be paid by the people, it need to be paid by the companies. And it is without fail you need to pay the tax to the government. Who is going to collect the tax? Apart from the government, anybody is there to collect the taxes here? Now, how many governments do we have in the economy? Central government. And technically we don't call it as central government because we have union government, state government and local governments, right? Yeah, we have local governments, right? Local governments, panchayatis and municipalities, local governments. Now understand, now try to understand this one. When we talk about the taxes, typically we have 2 types of taxes. The first one is the direct tax. The second one is the indirect tax. The first one is the direct tax and second one is indirect tax. Let's try to understand the meaning of a direct tax and indirect tax. Do you know the difference between direct tax and indirect tax? Basically, what is the difference between direct tax and indirect tax? Guys, listen. If impact of tax and incidence of tax is on single point, then you call it as a direct tax. If impact of tax and incidence of tax is on a single point, then we call it as a direct tax. And if impact of tax and incidence of tax is on multiple points, we call it as indirect tax. I'm pretty sure you haven't understood about it. What's the meaning of impact of tax and what's the meaning of see? Everyone just try to listen, try to understand the meaning of impact of tax. Now, what do you mean by impact of tax and what do you mean by incidence of tax? Incidence of tax. Impact of tax means on whom tax is levied. On whom tax is levied. Incidence of tax means ultimately who paid the tax. Ultimately who paid the tax. Are you able to understand? These are the technical jargon what you need to use in your mains answers. What do you mean by impact of tax? Impact of tax means on whom the tax is levied. Incidence of tax means ultimately who paid the tax to the government. That's the meaning of incidence of tax. Now, if impact of tax and incidence of tax is on a single point, you call it as a direct tax. And if impact of tax and incidence of tax is on multiple points, you call it as indirect tax. Indirect tax. Let me give an example to you so that you can understand this direct tax and indirect tax very clearly here. Let's suppose here we have the government of India. Let's suppose here we have the government of India. Now, let's suppose here we have an individual. Let's suppose here we have an individual. Now, this individual is earning an income of about 1,000 rupees. Now, you all know that in India, we need to pay the income tax to the government of India. We don't pay the income tax to the state governments, we pay the income tax to the government of India. Now, this person is earning an income of about 1,000. Now, government of India says that, those persons who are earning an income of about 1,000 rupees, they need to pay an income tax of 10% to the government of India. Right? Now, understand. Government of India says, those people who are earning an income of about 1,000 rupees, they need to pay a tax of 10% income tax to the government of India. Now, on whom the tax is levied? On this individual. Now, what is the term we use on whom the tax is levied? Impact of tax. Now, tell me, impact of tax is on this individual. On whom the tax is levied? This individual. Now, tell me guys, when the tax is levied on this individual, do you think he is going to pay the tax or somebody is going to pay the tax? He himself is going to pay the tax. Now, he is going to pay, say for example, here the income tax IT is equal to 10%, that is 100 rupees. This 100 rupees will be paid by this individual to the government of India. Now, what is the term we use for ultimately who is paying the tax? What is the term for it? Incidence of tax. Now, the incidence of tax is on the same individual. Incidence of tax. Incidence of tax. Now, in such a way, if impact of tax and incidence of tax is on a single point or on a single individual, we call this kind of a taxes as direct taxes. Okay. if impact of tax and incidence of tax is on a single point, then you call it as a direct tax. On whom the tax is levied, if they themselves pays the tax, that's called a direct tax. Clear? Understood? Now, try to understand the meaning of indirect tax. Try to understand the meaning of indirect tax. Let's take the government here again. Let's take the government here. Now, let's suppose here you have a bookshop. Let's suppose here you have a bookshop, and this bookshop is technically selling the books. Let's say the value of each book is, say, for example, 100 rupees. The value of each book is 100 rupees. Now try to understand. Here, the aspirant like you aspirants will purchase a lot of books. I don't know whether you're going to read it or not, but definitely you'll purchase a lot of books. Now try to understand. The government of India or the state government, say for example, state or Indian government, both levies the GST. Let's say this government of India is saying that, let's suppose I'm the government of India, you are the shopkeeper. Government of India says that, you shopkeeper, upon each and every book you sell to your customer, you need to pay me a GST of 10% upon it. On each and every book you sell to your customers, you need to pay me a GST of 10% upon it. Isn't it or not? Now, what is the GST of 10% here? GST of 10%. Now try to understand on whom the tax is levied here? On the shopkeeper. On whom the tax is levied? The shopkeeper. So impact of tax is on shopkeeper. Now when the ultimate student goes to the shop, do you think the shop owner is going to collect just 100 rupees and he is going to give that 10 rupees out of that to the government of India and he keeps 90 rupees? Is it going to happen in such a way? He will collect the 100 rupees from you and also he is going to collect the 10 rupees of tax GST from you, right? Totally he collects 110 from you, and out of this 110 he keeps 100 rupees with him, and the 10 rupees will be returned to him. Now ultimately, who paid the 10 rupees of the tax to the government here? This individual. So ultimately, the incidence of tax, ultimately who paid the tax? This individual. So incidence of tax is on this individual. So in such a way, if impact of tax and incidence of tax is on multiple points, you call this kind of taxes as indirect taxes. Understood? The meaning of direct taxes and indirect taxes. A tax is a compulsory levy, need to be paid to the government by the individuals and companies without fail. If it is levied upon you, you have to pay it. And how many types of taxes do we have? What are they? Direct taxes and indirect taxes. I'm just explaining the types of taxes. I'm not giving the note down of what are the different types of direct taxes. Now we are not going to discuss this. There is certain time, at least 1 or 2 classes I require to explain rest of the concepts to you so that I can discuss the direct taxes and indirect taxes. So just understand the basics in these classes itself. So tax is a compulsory levy, need to be paid to the government by the individuals or by the companies. How many types of taxes do we have? What are they? Direct taxes and indirect taxes. What's the direct tax? What is a direct tax? If impact of tax and incidence of tax is on a single point, what do we call it? Direct tax. And what do you mean by indirect tax? Impact of tax and incidence of tax is on multiple points. It's called indirect tax. Now here impact of tax is on the shopkeeper, incidence of tax is on individual. What do you mean by incidence of tax? Ultimately, who pays the tax? Impact of tax means? The name itself is indicating. Impact means, what do you mean by impact? Impact, on whom it is levied. You know the meaning of impact, right? On whom it is levied. Incidence means ultimately who is paying the tax, right? Understood the terms. Now here itself, I want you to understand one more term called tax base. Now what do you mean by tax base? What do you mean by base? Technically, you all know the meaning of base. This is the base. Basically, on the ground, we can construct a base. Now try to understand. A tax cannot be levied unless and until there is a tax base. In order to levy a tax, you need a tax base. Without tax base, government, whether the central government, whether the state government or the local governments cannot levy the tax. Tax base simply means what gets taxed. What's the meaning of tax base? Tax base means what gets taxed. Simply what gets taxed. I'll give the example to you. Just now you understood about the direct tax. Let's suppose this individual is earning an income of about 1000 rupees. Upon him, the government of India imposed an income tax of about 10%. Now, Now tell me guys, what is this income tax here? Income tax is a direct tax or indirect tax? Direct tax. This income tax is levied on what? This income tax is levied on what? Income earned by the individual, isn't it or not? Now, in this case, what is the tax base? Income. Here, in this case, the tax base is income. Tax base means what gets taxed. What got taxed here? The income earned by the individual got taxed. The income earned by the individual got taxed. So the tax base here is income earned by the individuals. Now, let me give one more example. There is a tax called excise duty. There is a tax called excise duty. Excise duty is a tax levied on the production of goods. Excise duty is a tax levied on the production of goods. Now tell me, what is the tax base in case of excise duty? What is the tax base in case of excise duty? Production of goods. Production of goods. Are you able to understand the meaning of tax base? Tax base simply means what gets taxed. In case of income tax, income is the one which is getting taxed, so income is called tax base. And in case of excise duty is a tax levied on the production of the goods. So in case of excise duty, what is the tax base? Production of goods. So in such a way, a tax is levied only on the tax base. Okay, let's suppose here we have a company. Let's suppose here we have a company. This company is earning an amount of, say for example, 10 lakhs. 10 lakhs. If company pays the tax, that's called corporate tax. Corporate tax. If company pays the tax, that's called corporate tax. Much simple, try to understand. If individual earns the income, if they pay tax to the government, that's called income tax. If company earns the income and if they pay tax to the government, that's called corporate tax. Now tell me, what is the tax base for corporate tax? Just think and tell me. If individual earns the income, he pays the tax to the government. If that's called income tax, personal income tax. If companies earn the profits, they pay tax to the government. That's called corporate tax. Now tell me, what is the tax base in case of income tax? Say it confidently. Income earned by individual. Now what is the tax base in case of corporate tax? Income earned by company. Are you able to understand? Tax base simply means what gets taxed. So you understood three things here. Tax is a compulsory levy. Now what is a direct tax? If impact of tax and incidence of tax is on single point, now we call it as direct tax. If impact of tax and incidence of tax is on multiple points, indirect tax. Example, GST. Understood? You also understood the meaning of tax base? Clear? Online students, are you following? Oh, we have 13 students today. Yeah, good morning. Yeah. I told you I'll start from the basics. I started from defining what is the meaning of a tax. Just basically note them down and then I'll explain the nature of the taxes. I think I'll take at least tomorrow, Saturday and Monday to complete the tax structure. I'll take the rest of the weekdays to complete the public finance. And I'll take a good amount of time for completing the money market. Once this is done, core part is going to get completed. No, we don't have a Sunday classes. At least I should get a break on Sunday. Okay. Once these three chapters are completed, the core part of the economy would be completed. 70% of the syllabus in part 1 would be completed. And then I'll explain the small chapters, insurance sector, economic development and growth. And then we have 3 more chapters, not completely big chapters, or medium chapters, external sector, WTO and all. WTO is a very favorite topic for UPSC. Every other year, you is going to have a lot of questions on, at least one question on the WTO. WTO, World Trade Organization. Now, once we're done with it, Indian economy is not going to take much time. It is going to happen at a quick pace. Write down. Start by defining the word. What's a tax? What's a tax? Come on, guys. In your own words. Huh? Yeah. And companies to aliens or government? Government. Okay. Write down. Tax is a compulsory levy. We'll understand the concept, we'll write it, we'll understand the concept again, new one, and we'll write it. Tax is a compulsory levy. Tax is a compulsory levy. Tax is a compulsory levy. Tax is a compulsory levy that need to be paid by economic entities. That need to be paid by economic entities. That need to be paid by economic entities. Guys, I want you to remember, for 150-word answer, you'll get 7 minutes. And for 250-word answer, approximately you'll get 11 to 12 minutes. You don't get 20, you don't write the answer and 250 words for 20 minutes and 30 minutes. Okay? Don't concentrate on neatness and in everything. It should be legible enough. Make it quick. Tax is a compulsory levy, need to be paid by economic entities. Economic entities in the bracket. Now what do you mean by economic entities? Individuals and companies. In the bracket, individuals and companies. In the bracket, individuals and companies. In the bracket, individuals and companies, right? Individuals and companies. To the government, 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 without fail, without fail, to the government without fail. That's the basic definition of the tax. Tax is a compulsory levy, need to be paid by the economic entities, people and companies, to the government without fail. Without fail. Full stop. Full stop. Next one. That's the definition of tax base. Tax base. That's the definition of tax base. But name itself is indicating it's a base. On that we levy the tax. Right down. It simply means what gets taxed. It simply means, tax base simply means what gets taxed. What gets taxed. Tax base simply means what gets taxed. That's it. No long definitions and all. What gets taxed. Tax base. Example. Example. What is the tax base in case of income tax? In case of income tax, at the example, tax base is income. In case of income tax, tax base is income earned by individual. Earned by individual. At one more example. In case of excise duty, what is the tax base? Very good. Excise duty is a tax levied on the production of the goods. So in case of excise duty, tax base is production of goods. Tax base is production of goods. Now without tax base, you don't pay the tax to the government. Okay. Without tax base, whether it's a direct tax or indirect tax, there should be a tax base. Understood? Okay. If you pay something to the government without a tax base, that becomes a fee. Fee, fine, they comes under the categories of fees and fines. Without a tax base, if you pay any money to the government, they comes under the definition of fees or fines. I'll discuss about the fees and fines and everything. But if you categorize something, money, you pay it to the government in the name of tax. For that, you should have a tax base. You can note there. You can note there. The government can't levy a tax. The government can't levy a tax. No matter there is the individuals or the corporate, it doesn't matter for us. The government can't levy a tax without a tax base. Without a tax base. Without a tax base. The government can't levy a tax without the tax base. Whether direct tax or indirect tax. Whether direct tax or indirect tax. Whether direct tax or indirect tax. No matter whether the tax is direct tax or indirect tax, you will have a tax base. What is the tax base in case of GST? When the good is sold to the customers, then only we levy the GST. What's the tax base for the GST? Selling the goods to the people or supplying the goods to the people. That's the meaning of tax base. Are you able to understand? But don't get confused. You all know the meaning of tax base. Tax base means you also know the transactions also. Tax base means what gets taxed when it is, whether it's production or it's income or it is supply of the goods, whatever it is. That's called tax base. I hope you understood the meaning of tax base now. Now, have a side heading, types of taxes. Types of taxes. Now, once we're done with this topic, we'll discuss one more topic and then we'll write it. Types of taxes. types of taxes. Taxes. How many types of taxes do we have? What are they? Yeah. Write down. Write down. First one, direct tax. Write the first one, direct tax. Direct tax. Direct tax. Define direct tax. Yeah. Write down. Write the definition. If impact of tax and incidence of tax, if impact of tax and incidence of tax is on a single point, if impact of tax and incidence of tax is on a single point, if impact of tax and incidence of tax is on a single point, if impact of tax and incidence of tax is on a single point, if impact of tax and incidence of tax is on a single point, it's called direct tax. It's called direct tax. That the meanings of these terms, impact of tax and incidence of tax. On the economic standard books, you may either find the meaning of this impact of tax and incidence of tax, or if you find, you will get 4 to 5 lines definition. That's not required. Impact of tax means on whom the tax is levied. Incidence of tax means ultimately who pays the tax. Ultimately who pays the tax. But tell me, in the direct taxes, can the individual push the burden on paying the tax to the government on someone else? Now, in the indirect taxes, can the individual push the burden of paying the tax on someone? That's what he is doing in the name of indirect taxes. See, direct tax means directly paying the tax to the government. Indirect tax means through someone you are paying the tax to the government. Individual is paying the tax of 10 rupees GST to the government through the shopkeeper. And that's why we call it as indirect tax. We are indirectly paying the tax to the government. Okay. Let this example. Where is this impact of? Yeah. Let this one, direct tax. Incidence of tax and impact of tax is on single point. Is on a single point. The single point is this individual. If impact of tax and incidence of tax is on single point, that's called individual. No, this is not pi. Income tax is equal to 10%, that is 100 rupees, is paid by the individual. Is paid by the individual. So, then these arrow marks are important. Impact of tax and incidence of tax. Then, let the next one, indirect tax. Indirect tax. Indirect tax. What's the definition, guys? Indirect tax. If impact and incidence is on multiple points, we call it as indirect tax. Right? If impact and incidence is on multiple points, 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 then it's called indirect tax. Then it's called indirect tax. If impact and incidence is on multiple points, then it's called indirect tax. Then it's called indirect tax. Then, write this example. Write this example. Impact of tax is on this shopkeeper and incidence of tax is on this individual. And you can add here, pays 10 rupees of GST. Pays 10 rupees of GST to the government. That's the meaning of indirect tax. I think I'm giving the whole new perspectives of taxes to you here. Now here you can add state or government. Both are same. State or government. Now you understood here. You don't need to look at the board. You can directly draw it. Everyone. If at all there is, try to draw it on your own. If at all you have a doubt, then you look at the board. Don't give a separate time for preparing economics. In class itself, it would be completed. Done? Done. Make a note there. Make a note below. NOT note. 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 In case of direct taxes, 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 the burden of paying tax, the burden of paying tax, the burden of paying tax, the burden of paying tax can't be pushed on someone, can't be pushed on someone, can't be pushed on someone. You can't push it, push the burden of paying tax on someone in case of direct taxes, which is possible in case of indirect 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 taxes. Okay. Now we haven't discussed about what are the direct taxes, what are the indirect taxes yet. I'm just giving you, I'm starting the basics here. Okay. Now we will discuss one more topic called classification of taxation in the economy.